This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's March 30th, 2026. Saturday marked the 230th anniversary of the first time the Tennessee General Assembly gathered together. And today we can use the term state legislature interchangeably with that formal name, General Assembly. But it would have been just a little presumptive to do so in 1796. That meeting was about creating a legal framework for our territory to become a state. A state constitution had been drafted that February. The General Assembly met for the tail end of March and first few weeks of April to act on that constitution and pass a few initial laws, which became effective later that year when Tennessee's statehood became official. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Tennessee's now on its third constitution, and that's been amended to change things quite a few times. What I'm saying is that a lot has changed in the last 230 years, but our legislature is still called the General Assembly, and right now that body is in its 114th session. Now, that number doesn't seem right at first because 114 is way less than 230. It's partly because each legislative session lasts 2 years. Basically, the session count only moves up after a new class of legislators are elected and sworn in. Now, those sessions are generally broken into two big chunks, one for each year. Legislators gather in January. They work just about every weekday at the State House for a solid stretch of weeks or months. Then they adjourn until the next year. Some special committee or working group meetings might happen during the summer and fall, but bills can't move through the lawmaking process outside of that burst of activity in the first part of the calendar year. Now, when I first started working in news a little over 20 years ago, Tennessee's General Assembly was usually deep in the weeds come late March. It wasn't unusual for full-scale legislative activity to keep going all the way into June. That's changed in recent years. And in fact, the way it goes now, we are currently at the point in the year where I've heard multiple people ask our reporter at the State House, Mariana Bacchiao, for her prediction of when the session will end. All signs point to that end of full-scale legislative business for the year happening sooner rather than later. For those of us keeping an eye on state government, it's really good to know that timing so we have a better idea of whether bills that haven't yet passed have a real chance or not. Now, I should say at this point that the stakes are a little different depending on which year of the session it is. The current legislative session began in 2025, and that meant that some bills set aside around this time last year were brought back up for debate pretty much as soon as the lawmakers came back to Nashville this January. They'd been through some committees last year, or maybe they passed in one chamber or hadn't come up for a vote in the other. Those bills just needed a little more attention to be ready for final passage. And so they were some of the first items for 2026 business. This time, however, we're in an election year. The 2-year session will end when the gavel is pounded soon to adjourn. Any bills that haven't yet passed will be fully dead. Come next January, legislators can file again with the same language or idea, but they'll have to start all over from scratch. Of course, we generally don't hear lawmakers explicitly say that a bill is dead. What we do often hear in committee meetings is someone saying a measure is being placed behind the budget. That means its process is at least paused until after the legislature passes the state budget for the coming fiscal year. Now, the budget is generally the biggest piece of business they need to attend to, and they put it off until nearly the end because, for one thing, it's complex and takes time to sort through. But for another, if they pass a bill to have the state do something that will cost tax dollars, that new cost has to be worked into the spending measure. So they wait to vote on the budget until they've decided whether or not to do expensive things, like expanding the number of available school vouchers. The flip side of that is that there's not much possibility to pay for bills that pass after the budget has been set. If the measure carries a price tag and it's placed behind the budget, there are ways to get around it, but don't hold your breath. In recent weeks, we've seen more and more bills being placed behind the budget, so we know lawmakers are trying to wrap up the session. The other telling thing is, of course, passing that budget, but also when they decide to move into what's called flow motion. Not slow motion, but flow motion with an F, which is the exact opposite of slow. It's a customary thing the General Assembly does when members are really, really ready to wrap up for the year. Each chamber votes to essentially switch to a much simpler set of operating rules so they can power through, passing measures at top speed. But even then, a lot of bills are set to the side and left to languish. And like I said, this year being the end of the 2-year session, if they're still off on the side when the session ends, the bills are completely dead. So, what can you expect from the General Assembly right now? Well, for one thing, expect to hear about a lot of bills passing. For the first part of the legislative season, most of the business is happening in committees, but now we're at the phase where there's more major action on the House and Senate floor. There are more high-profile measures reaching their legislative conclusion now. And the lawmakers are just generally trying to speed things up where they can. That can become confusing or overwhelming as someone who's just trying to keep up with the news. It can make our newscasts really heavy with legislative items for a little while. They're going to churn through things really quickly, and then bang, gavel sounds, and the session is over. After that flurry, here at WPLN News, we will continue to sort through what happened for you. Yes, there's this rush of legislative news right now, but some measures will need more explaining as they become law, as they're carried out, or as they're challenged in court. And so when the business of the day slows down, we'll have a little more time available to dig in a little bit deeper to the ramifications and how these measures affect the average Tennessean. But again, we're in that fast and furious portion of the legislative year, so buckle up and stay with us as we monitor what does and doesn't become state law. In just a few minutes, people seem to consider GLP-1s a kind of weight loss magic, but there's more to know about taking those medications. That's coming up after the newscast.
I'm music and culture reporter Justin Barney, and I like doing weird stories. And because we're funded by listeners, I get to do weird stories, and you get to hear them. Like last year, I did this story about the Lost Wave community on Reddit and how one of their users in the Middle East tracked down a song that was put on a mixtape 2 decades ago and thought to be lost to time, but it was actually made by a bartender in Nashville when he was 18 years old. Keep weird stories alive by supporting public radio at WPLN.org.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Protests against the Trump administration took place all across the U.S. this weekend. It was the third series of No Kings demonstrations. Events were planned in over 3,000 cities, from major metropolises to small towns. A few dozen Cheatham County residents gathered in Ashland City on Saturday. Carl Vipperman lives in Kingston Springs. He's worried about the rollback of environmental protections and incentives for renewable energy.
He's doing it so he can shut down free energy so that the people that sell expensive energy can cash in.
He says the administration has instead boosted the use of fossil fuels.
Then they got nothing to sell you but grease.
Vipperman says the fossil fuel industry doesn't want the public to support wind and solar. About 30 miles southeast of that protest, thousands of people marched on the streets in downtown Nashville. It will be an emotional day across Montgomery County as students return to class for the first time since a fatal bus crash. The collision on Friday killed 2 Kenwood Middle School students and hospitalized several others. The district is encouraging people to wear Kenwood's colors of black and gold today. Counselors will be available. In an emotional written statement, District Director Jean Luda Vetter recounted visiting families in hospitals and finding herself, quote, overwhelmed by the selfless and compassionate moments I observed. She was joined by city, county, and state officials in expressing condolences for those impacted. The Kenwood bus was transporting 25 students and 5 adults to an electric go-kart competition in Jackson when it collided with a dump truck on Highway 70 in Carroll County. Dashcam video shows the bus veering over the double yellow line just before impact. The Tennessee Highway Patrol says it will take a substantial investigation to know exactly what happened. The names and addresses of officers involved in immigration enforcement will be confidential under a measure headed to the governor's desk. House Speaker Cameron Sexton filed the legislation last summer after the names of ICE agents were inadvertently made public on a Nashville website. Any local government official that releases identifying info could be ousted from office and charged with a Class E felony under the measure. The bill passed the House as Tennessee's immigration enforcement operations have come under scrutiny. Nashvillians' confidence in their city leaders is wavering. That's according to a Vanderbilt poll released last week. WPLN's Cynthia Abrams reports that some of that lost trust can be attributed to Winter Storm Fern.
The destructive ice storm zapped the optimism in residents, the report says. But because the poll was conducted in the months following the storm, researchers say it's likely that sentiment will rebound. Still, the diminished support of city leaders is about more than the storm. Mayor Freddie O'Connell's approval ratings have dropped by 13%, though only 9% of respondents blamed him for the recovery efforts. The majority blamed the Nashville Electric Service, or Mother Nature. For the first time ever in survey history, the Metro Council faced a disapproving majority. Respondents felt like leaders need to focus more on neighborhood improvements instead of large-scale projects. Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
Rutherford County's top librarian is facing termination. Luann James refused an order to relocate more than 100 books from the children's section to the adult section, arguing that doing so is a form of censorship. The library's board voted earlier this month to move the books. James argued she's ethically bound to uphold the First Amendment of the Constitution. She also says moving books with LGBTQ+ content is a clear act of viewpoint discrimination, and libraries are important repositories of diverse ideas. The Rutherford County Library Board will vote on whether to keep or oust the librarian in a meeting that starts at 5 p.m. today at the Rutherford County Courthouse. After 9 months of closure, Nashville's main library is reopening today. The downtown library closed in June after a fire erupted in the adjoining parking garage. That parking structure will not be reopening with the library, says NPL Director Terry Luke.
They are looking for a partial reopening, but we do not have a date. But what we've done for our customers is to be able to work with McKendree, which is literally right across on 6th Avenue, for reduced rate parking. And we are also working with Nashville Yards, which is up on 9th, at 9th, so it would be 2 blocks for customers to walk down. And again, for customers to be able to take transit, they have that option as well.
About 90% of the library faced soot and smoke damage, but nearly all books and materials were restorable. The auditorium and conference center took the brunt of the impact, and that first floor area will remain closed for long-term restoration. The time has come to finish clearing tree debris from the ice storm. Nashville setting April 19th as the deadline to have all materials placed at the curb. Crews with NDOT are on their second round of pickups, and the city says the third pass will be its last. After that, regular quarterly brush collection will resume. Metro's collected a record-setting amount of vegetation debris. In just the last 6 weeks, the city gathered 18 times more than in all of 2025. Nashville residents who need help can call 211 or visit NashvilleResponds.com. Meanwhile, the city of Brentwood has ended its targeted response to the ice storm. Last week, crews wrapped up the special effort to collect downed tree limbs. Altogether, they gathered more than 323,000 cubic yards of debris, which was more than twice as much as was initially estimated. There are still some piles of tree limbs along roadways, but the normal brush pickup schedule will be adequate to haul those away.
You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org.
GLP-1s have quickly become one of the most popular weight loss drugs in America. 1 in 5 people have taken them at some point, according to KFF research. But it takes more than a regular shot to be successful. Kara Anthony and Blake Farmer of HealthQ are your approachable guides to an unapproachable healthcare system.
This might sound like an old school rule, Blake, but I was always taught you shouldn't ask a woman about her age, and under no circumstances should you ever ask about her weight. But I decided to break that rule for this story.
Oh boy, all right, tell us how it went.
Look, some people did not want to talk, but Jelon Smart from Georgia was surprisingly open. She used to be 285 pounds, and she was on Ozempic, which is one of those weight loss injection medications, because she was having severe ankle pain and trouble walking.
Lost weight without changing any habits, lost about 30 pounds and plateaued. Then I realized I needed to start moving my body. So started moving my body, going to the gym. I'm in the gym now 6 days a week.
She ended up losing 110 pounds over the course of a year.
I mean, that is a lot of weight to lose. But I'm hearing her say that it wasn't just the medication, it was also the exercise.
Yes, exactly. This is something I heard from everyone I talked to, that healthy lifestyle changes are still really important when you're taking a GLP-1. Exercise, smart food choices, plenty of sleep, all the basics. That's not only going to help you lose weight, but it's also going to help you keep it off.
Yeah, we know that's important. So this medicine is not necessarily a fast fix on its own.
Right. One doctor said people sometimes try to accelerate the process by taking a higher dose of the medication, but this can have serious consequences with side effects including constipation and vomiting or even dehydration. So you have to stay in constant communication with your doctor.
So you want a medical doctor to monitor your physical changes, but it seems like you might need somebody who also specializes in the emotional side of this.
I talked to Dr. Dafina Allen in Saginaw, Michigan. She's been practicing obesity medicine for 10 years and runs a clinic. And she says mental health is key to all this.
Because I can tell you about the patients that I helped lose 50 pounds, that I helped lose 100 pounds, and they still look in the mirror and are not happy. And so we want to really continue to help patients improve their body image as well.
We know that our minds and our bodies are deeply connected, and food especially can be very emotional. I'll admit, after my Pooh Bear and I broke up, the first thing I did was head straight to the drive-thru for a strawberry milkshake. A weight loss drug might reduce my craving for that milkshake, but it won't bring my Pooh Bear back or heal my heartache.
Well, can I suggest a chocolate milkshake?
Blake, I hate chocolate.
All right. You're telling me a GLP-1 is not a replacement for good therapy?
It's definitely not. Weight loss is a complicated and emotional journey with or without a weight loss drug. So be patient with yourself.
That's Kara Anthony and Blake Farmer of HealthQ from WPLN and KFF Health News. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. So subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter, too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.